Hello. Last session of the day. Hope you're still a bit awake. First, sorry for my cold. I think I got it yesterday in airports while flying. So here I am now giving it back. We like to give back to the community. Yeah, so I'm sharing the cold with everyone in the conference. Is that? Okay, that's better. What are my slides? Right, so in the next 60 minutes, we're going to talk about one of the trends these days in technology, because I like trends, I'm a trendy woman, woo, and probably the future of UX and UI. A few things about me before we start. My name is Rabeb. I go by a nickname Bibi. Apparently, it's easier for everyone to call me Bibi, so feel free to call me Bibi. I work as a developer advocate for a company called Nexmo. We do cloud communication APIs like SMS, voice, 2FA verification, this sort of things. And because I'm there like .NET developer advocate, I get to play with different technologies and hack, and that's why I'm talking about bots today. I'm also the regional director of Women Who Code in Bristol. Yeah, because we still need hashtags in 2018, so we still need those user groups as well. I like traveling, I like a bit of photography, and I like coffee. I really like good coffee. Right. I'm going to start with a bit of history. In the old good days where machines used to be that big and black screens, nothing much on them, and you barely can search for a file because it's just complicated, but we were too excited about them. But then we did something a bit better, and we moved to the web. And with the web came the server, and we managed to write some code that is not on this, like big screen, and things are getting easier. And we loved the web. And because we loved the web, we decided, why don't we make this amazing thing on smaller devices so we can have it everywhere? And that's when also we moved to more smaller devices, laptops, mobile phones, tablets. As you can tell, with this shift in the type of the devices and where we are storing our code, there was a shift in the size of screens and the way we interact with the screens as well. So we moved from clicks to scrolling, but even scrolling is now becoming a bit of a task for humans. We are lazy, right? So we kind of thought, oh, why don't we move to something else? Why don't we move to voice? Because it's easier, let's face it. But this shift didn't just happen like that. This shift is the result in lots of progress and work done in different fields. Mostly the fields that used to be a research lab kind of thing, AI, languages processing. But now we took all these separate kind of works on these, and we said, why don't we, instead of leaving them just as a research, like some sort of elitism kind of thing, not everyone can understand it, why don't we bring them to the end user and do something useful with them? And that's when we started talking about contextual communication. We are using the language, we are using AI, and we are changing the way the user communicates with applications. Basically, contextual communication is, as the name says, it's a communication with a context. You have two parts, and there is a context. It's not just like flowing informations like that. Think about it. Now, if you need to do anything, if you need to call your doctor, if you need to book an appointment, if you need to call HMRC, good luck with that one. But if you need to do any of that, you're talking to a robot. You know that. You're not talking to a human, but it sounds like a human, and there is a context to the conversation. They ask you about your name, you give the name, and then they move to the next question. If you answer, if they don't hear you or something, they will say, oh, I didn't hear you, say that again. So now we are talking about having a context. It's contextual communication. And it's not just the small things like Alexa or Google Home to look for the weather, but we are talking about big businesses, travel agencies, like ordering food, or call centers. Because now we are moving from call centers with the humans to call centers that are basically a machine behind the screen. And when we talk about contextual communication, we talk about conversational interfaces. This communication, it still needs an interface, but it's just different. And when I use the word interface, it's not UI interfaces. It's not the traditional, don't think of it as a screen. And we say conversational because we do converse with the machines. Chatbots, again, the home assistants that we have now, there is some sort of conversation. So conversational interfaces, there are 3 types. There is the text-based ones, chatbots, almost now on every website or every service. You go there and they're like, hi, would you like to chat to Rachel? Rachel will help you. And then we have the voice-based ones, Alexa. Or if you have a Google Home, that's also based on voice. And you have those who are both of them, because if you are using the Cortana on your phone, or if you are using the Google Assistant on the phone, you have the ability to use your voice to talk to them or to type in the same time. I'm going to focus more on the voice-based experience, because that's where we are heading, basically. And the value of the voice experience, why we should consider voice. The first thing is, and which is obvious, is the speed. Think about it. If you need to search something on your phone, I don't know, if you need to book a flight or even look for the weather in a certain city, you need to get the phone, go to the app, go to the search box, type, and maybe you have a menu in there and you need to click to navigate between few pages until you find that search thing. You do the search, you click the search button, and then you will get the result. Now with the voice, all you have to say is, Cortana, how's the weather in London? Or, okay, Google, what's the temperature in Lisbon? So we talk about speed. And simplicity. It's simple. Like, everyone uses their voices. Since we are babies, we use voice. My mom would struggle to use some apps, maybe. She's not a very techie person. But if I give her the option to simply use her voice that she uses every day, probably she would manage to use that after, she would get used to the fact that she needs to say the word Cortana and then ask for what she needs. And that would be more simpler for her to do that than to use the phone or even the laptop in the traditional ways. And the other thing is, which is a bit obvious, is the fact that it's available everywhere. We are using a human language. We all speak that language, so it is everywhere. Your users, you don't have, all of the humans are your users. Right. Now, let's look at this from a developer point of view. When we say designing for conversational interfaces, it's not the traditional design as design, but it's thinking about your the whole experience, what you are offering to the user. A few things to consider. I will start with the capabilities of your tech, although this one applies to almost every app you're building. Whatever you're building, you need to consider what you have, really. You need to make it smart. There is no point building a bot that doesn't do anything or it's doing the wrong thing. If I want to order pizza, I would be really upset if I'm booking a flight to New York, because the price difference is quite big there. So it needs to be smart. So how are we building it? We need to think about all the possibilities, and that takes me to the other thing, which is the structure of the information. Because when we are building these conversational interfaces, we can't really talk about error. We can't have use cases, because literally the user can type or say whatever they want. So how are we going to deal with this? That wasn't me. One obvious example of this is if, for example, I say, book me a flight on the 20th of April. What do I mean by the 20th of April? Is that 2018? Well, April is not a good month. Let me say on the 1st of January. Does that mean this year, which doesn't make any sense because that's in the past? Do I need next year, which logically makes more sense? And how is this bot will interact with me? Would they just imply that I mean next year and they book that? Or do they ask me the next question and say, what do you mean? Specify more. Most of the time, they just keep asking you until you give them a more specific answer. So they wouldn't say, oh, I did. They would just say, when, until you give them a more specific answer. And the other thing, obviously, use a language that users understand and can relate to. If you're targeting users, I don't know, maybe in a Chinese-speaking country, maybe you should consider doing it in Chinese better than English. Or if you're targeting a more global clients, maybe use English. Now, I want to, this is a lie. We are not going to write code, actually. But I want to show a nice tool from Microsoft that help with these things, that help us build smart models and that they understand the language, which is quite nice and fairly easy to use. It's Lois. Did anyone heard about Lois? That's not on my screen yet. Right. Let's see. Do I have? Oh, okay. So it took me a while to understand that Lois is just not a random Lois name. Lois stands for Language Understanding Intelligence Service. And what Lois does, Lois is basically you are building your language model and training it. In the same way, if you have an app and you want to do the, what's the temperature now in London? What's the temperature in London? That's a language model. So Lois help you do that. It's Lois.ai. You need to log in with any Microsoft email and then create new app. I have few like demo apps, and it should work. So if I click on create, the usual stuff, NDC, demo, you can here see the list of languages that you can use. There are a few of them. And then you can type a description. And if I say done, it's creating the app. And while it's loading it, oh, did that load? No, OK. While it's loading it, so there are a few terms to know. We have intent, and intent is what's the intention. We are talking in a human language, but in the end of the day, the bot is an application. So how are we going to translate that human language sentence to something that the bot understands and based on that do something? So for example, here this is an app where it's an app to order food, takeaways or whatever. So for example, my intent is, the most important one is order food. So I have an intent. I just create new intent, and you give it, that's probably me, and you just give it a name. So I have order food. The by default intent you get is none, and none means is probably something that the model didn't understand or doesn't qualify as ordering food. If I say, it's such a lovely day in London, it probably would say, that doesn't sound like she wants to order food, so I'm just going to classify this as none. I have another intent over there, which is specify payment. Let's imagine that my app asks me if I am going to pay by cash when the delivery arrives, or I'm going to use card payment. And we have entities. And think about entities as variables or properties. So the entities in my intent, probably, you just give them names. So I'm saying payment methods and my order. So with that intent, specify payment, I would say, I want to pay cash. So that word cash is the entity. That's the payment method. And then when I'm using this language model in my application, I would say, oh, I want you to take that payment method, and based on that, do this, this, and this. But in order for this to be smart, I need to add what we call utterances, which is basically these sentences that the user would say, like for I'll pay with cash. If I say, I'm paying with cash. So it will add it in here, and I click on this cash, and I say, here I can see my entities, and I say the word cash is payment methods. Obviously, in a real-world scenario, you don't just put like 2 or 3 of these, because the more you add, that's the training for your model. So the more utterances you add, the smarter, hopefully, it becomes. And then I say, I did train it earlier, so if I want to test, if I only know how to click, you have untrained, it's telling me that I have untrained chains, but it's fine. And you can tell because I'm not really doing that properly. When I said the weather is nice, it thinks I'm ordering food. Let's say I want to order sorry. So I click on that, and in here, that's what I typed, and the top scoring intent. So each of these 3 intents will get some sort of score, basically. It says the probability that what this sentence means, it's ordering food, that's 0.3. And probably the other ones are getting, sometimes they just get 0 or something. And that's how you train your model. And once you have a proper model that you're happy with, you can publish it. Let me just put this. So publishing this, because it's going to publish it to Azure, so you'll have the usual stuff like what time zone, and are you doing that in staging or production, and then you get few other things. If I just say that, I wonder if it would. Region key and endpoint. I'm not sure if it will allow me just to publish it because I'm just on trial. Yeah, publishing complete, and it should show me that this is my endpoint, which is a JSON, and if I go to the end of this endpoint, this queue here is query. So I still can test here and say query pay cache. I wonder if it would change anything. And now that my query is not empty anymore, it's telling me what I did and the score and stuff like that. And then if you, obviously that's kind of the first part of what you need to do. And then if you want to use Lois with your bot applications, you will need your proper endpoint, and you use it with your app. You need to provide the usual stuff like your key, the endpoint, and a few informations, and then you just say, oh, I want you to recognize Lois. So whenever I'm using Lois in this bot will recognize Lois, and for every intent, you say, this is what I want to happen. If that's the intent that we are getting, I want you to do this, this, and this, like any app. So if I go, so this is, we talked about Lois, and now I'm going to talk a bit about the Microsoft Bot Framework, which is basically if you want to build conversational interfaces using Microsoft technologies, that's what you're going to use. So Microsoft offers the bots. You can use them writing in Node.js or .NET, or also they are pushing a lot to use Azure. So you can write Azure bots these days. What I do mostly is I use old good .NET. So usually you need to use your bot, you need a channel of communication. So Cortana is not the bot. Cortana is a channel, and we call them skills. A skill is like just a unit of intelligence. It is an application. It's your bot, but you're going to invoke it through Cortana. It's not the only way. You can use them, obviously, with Slack, Messenger, lots of other things. Bing, there is different ways, but obviously the most known one is Cortana because it is intended to that. So what happened is you simply create a bot, and then you build and deploy your bot. And the users, when they converse with Cortana, Cortana would invoke the bot because it's already registered as a skill. Now, there are two ways to do this. If I can, all right. Right. So either you, just like Lois, if you go to dev.botframeworks.com and you log in, you'll have a list of your bots or how to create a bot. You can start from the Cortana website and you say, I want to create a Cortana skill, which when clicking on the button will simply take you through the bots and say, would you want to register one of these existing bots as a Cortana skill, or are you going to create a new one? The other way to do it is to start from the bot. So you create your bots, you register them in here, and then you go and say, and you simply say, I want, right. So this is the, as I mentioned, the channels where you can use these bots, and I'm not sure why the page is so weird. And then you can add something. For example, I say I want to add Microsoft Teams channel. So I would be able to use this bot within Microsoft Teams. And then you do some configuration stuff, and you have the ability, if you change your mind, you have the ability to delete the channel. Back to this now. It keeps going to the first page. I have no idea why. So as long as it's registered, Cortana would know the bot with keys again, and it will invoke it. This is exactly the same thing as I was saying. It's just written differently, I think. So just build the bot, then register it as a skill, and you publish the skill. And let's go see a few things. About, right. I love this page because it has the files that I need to download. So, so far, the bot template, the bot framework is not available for Visual Studio for Mac. So you need a Windows machine. That's the first thing. And then you need to download few files, few templates to get the template and be able to do it. So you need to have Visual Studio 2017. And they say update all your extensions. And then you need to get these three files here, the bot application, the bot controller, and the bot dialog. And they are zip files. You need to install the bot controller under your Visual Studio templates, C# and project template directory. And to get the item template, you need to install the controller and dialog zips. You put them under, again, Visual Studio template, C#, item template directory this time, not the project directory. Also, the other thing that you need to install, which is simply a desktop application, is the bot framework emulator. So it will help you test your bots locally, which is quite nice because you get the log, you see what's happening, and also you see, basically, you test stuff in there. So, I'll go to this one. So because obviously I have all these zip files in the right place, I can, if I go say new project, and because lately I was using like bot applications, so it comes in there, and I'm gonna say NDC demo. Okay. And as you can see here, the a bot project is basically a web application in the end of the day. So you get all your web config and the usual stuff, basically. So in the web config, when we register the bot in that portal I showed you, dev.botframework.com, when you want to register your bot, it will generate some values, some keys, a bot ID, an Microsoft app ID, and the password. They go in here in the web.config. You will need the same values to register the bot as a Cortana skill. And the reason for that is when you publish your bot and when someone invoke it, Cortana would go and say, what do they mean? Oh, it's that bot over here. So the only way to know that is with these keys. Here we have a message controller, and it always does that when you first run it. I just need to restart the project or just build it, and it will be fine. But in this post method, whenever the user sends a message, that's the method that will know that there is a message, and it will call the root dialog or any other dialog if you're using dialogues. And in the root dialog, that's when we decide what to do with that method in this message receive. For example, this is the in the by default piece of code you get with when you first install the project. All it does, when it receives a message, it makes sure first it's a user message, because it could be a system message, notification, or something else related to the system, not the end user. And all it says, oh, I got this message. Can you count how many characters? And it posts it back. It's just a sample. But any logic you need to do, any kind of thinking and processing you need to do with the message that you receive, it's going to happen here. So, in this app over here, I'm doing things a bit differently. So depends on your app, your needs, and how complicated the app is. There are a few ways to handle dialogues. So you can use a simple dialogue, or you can use things that makes your life easier. So here I'm using a form flow. So a form flow handles everything for me. All I need to do is to specify exactly what I need. So I have in this demo here, what I'm demoing is how to use a 2FA verification. So assuming that my bot is an app that needs a verification code, so before doing anything. So the bot here would ask the user a few questions to get some information, including the phone number, and after that would send the verification code. So as I said, with the form flow here, I'm saying, so this is my strings, and this is what prompts these. So this is what the bot will be asking. What's your name? What's your first name? What's your last name? Etc. And then we build the form, and we go like what you're going to say in the beginning. When the form is complete, what's going to happen. And inside my controller, now, instead of using that root dialog, I'm using this new dialog, which is, I'm calling it here, make root dialog. And it knows it's of type user profile. So I have a chain, and I say, from this, I want you to do this. When it's completed, when the form is completed, I want to send a verification code to the user. And you can handle exceptions in the usual way. I say, if something wrong happens, this is what we want to tell the user again. So in here, I'm calling that, and I'm saying, instead of calling the root dialog that I got for free, no, I want you to call this new one that I created myself. And then what happens after that is that when everything is finished, I want to reply, say thank you, for example, or do something. And this is my, in this private function in here, I'm just sending verification code using the Nexmo verification APIs. So if I run this, as I said, because it is simply a web application, so I can run it, but what I need is the endpoint. I'm using my local endpoint. Usually you put your URL, and then you put API messages. If this was published, I would need that ID and my password to connect to it. But because it's local on my machine, I don't need any of that. I simply say connect without filling these. And hopefully, first, I'm going to do that. And hopefully it would connect to it. So I'm just going to trigger saying, let's say hi. And if you follow the logs, it will tell you exactly what's happening. And here, it's telling me off for not updating to the latest SDK, which I probably should do. So for example, I say, my name is Rabeb. That. And then it's telling me to be able to send me that verification code. I need to give my phone number, which is fine. I do that. And I say, as you can tell, because I just specified that I'm using the form flow, I didn't do anything. This is part of the form flow. So it's not something like I coded saying, oh, I want you to get all of this information and put them in a nice box or anything. I just get it for free. So I say yes. Profile is complete. And then hopefully it will send me a code soon. Maybe not. I did receive one. Here, the last one at 5 p.m. And then I'm going to type this. And it says, thank you. The next thing probably to do, if I wasn't lazy, is to properly check that that is a verification code. But it's some of the things that you can do with it, really. So this is what I have to say about this, just a brief kind of introduction to the world of bots and how we should, what considerations as developers and why is it important for us to consider that, because apparently it's the future. Obviously, if you are interested in the bot framework and Cortana, Microsoft has an amazing documentation. They did a great job on their new documentation. There is like samples on GitHub, very detailed documentation and all of that. It can be a bit confusing. It was overwhelming to have all like 1,000 portal to go through and to register thing and to get too many keys, but after a certain point you get it. If you'd like to learn more about contextual communication, that's the website for my company. They pay me to be here. But because that's what we do, we are all about APIs, and we don't just innovate with Microsoft. So we have connectors for Alexa, and we have also a project with IBM Watson. So we are really invested in this area. And my whole team, that's what we do, basically. Thank you, and sorry for the cold. And I don't know if you have any questions. I know it's the end of the day, but so if you have any questions.
Sorry. Yeah, what is it, I can guess that what you sort of showed there was kind of almost kind of login process, but what...
I'm coming over here, that's easier, sorry.
How do you get contextual information? Can you identify the user?
Sorry.
How do you know who is talking to you? If you want to order a pizza, sorry, thank you.
Oh.
If you want to order a pizza, you need to know who they are. Where does that fit in the flow?
That has legal stuff to do. So you can register information about the user, but after their consent. Yeah. Consent these days. Yes. So legally, you can't just take, for example, if you are using the same app all the time, you can ask them if they need to save their payment method, their card, or even their name, but only if they let you do that. And based on that, they say that the system gets smarter because it gets these informations and try to build on them.
How would you? So the bit I don't understand though is, so say you open up Cortana and you say, when is my delivery from Joe Bloggs arriving? There's enough context there. Say Joe Bloggs was the company. There's enough context there to be able to look that up if I'm allowed to look at that person's account. Let's say, how what joins those things up?
No, because like in the end of the day, what you're doing through Cortana is kind of bridging to another app. So, for example, let's say if you want to book or buy anything through Amazon Alexa, it's not because your skill it's not what's doing that. It's because you are connecting that skill to your Amazon account. Yes. Right. So with any other application, you are connecting that skill to the main application. So probably if it's, I don't know, a delivery or something, at some point, you will need to provide the right input to do that. For example, I listen to my Spotify on Google Home, but the first time to do it, it did ask me to connect my Spotify using the phone, obviously, not just on using the Google Home, but it says, look, we have an application with the settings on the phone for you, so go there, connect to the Wi-Fi so I know what I'm using, put few information. Oh, and if you want to use Spotify, it needs to be a premium account. Would you like to connect to your account? So there is always a bit of setting. It's not just randomly
No,
like
no,
that.
absolutely. I just wondered, with Microsoft Bot Framework, how much of that is packaged in? Do you have any concept of who the person is talking, who it is talking?
It's still the same thing, and they specifically say you can't get any. You can have like the user's information because the bot gets smarter, and they have ways to make them to learn as you use them. But you can't do that unless you have the consent of the user to store this data and use it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.